2 years ago, Russia cut off natural gas to Europe. Factories closed, energy prices exploded, governments panicked. They said it could never happen again. They said they learned their lesson. They were wrong. Because Russia just did the exact same thing with silver. And this time, the consequences will be far worse. I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now. I need you to understand that what I am about to tell you is not a drill. This is not a hypothetical scenario from some geopolitical think tank. This is not a war game simulation. This happened. It is real. And the shockwaves are going to ripple through the global economy for years to come. The Russian Federation has officially announced an immediate embargo on silver exports to all NATO member countries, effective immediately. No phase-in period, no negotiation window, no exceptions. One day the silver was flowing, the next day it stopped. 43 million ounces per year, gone from the Western supply chain with a stroke of a pen. Let me put that number in context because I do not think people understand the magnitude of what just happened. Russia is the fourth largest silver producer in the world. They produce approximately 43 million ounces per year. That is roughly 5% of total global mine supply. Now 5% might not sound like a lot. You might be thinking that the market can absorb a 5% supply shock. You would be catastrophically wrong. And let me explain why. The silver market is not like the oil market. The oil market has spare capacity. Saudi Arabia can turn on the taps. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve can be released. There are buffers in the system. The silver market has no buffers. The silver market is already running at a deficit. Demand exceeds supply by over 200 million ounces per year. The vaults are already draining. The COMEX registered inventory has already lost 80 million ounces in 6 months. There is no spare capacity. There is no strategic silver reserve. There is nothing to release, nothing to cushion the blow. When you remove 43 million ounces from an already deficit market, you do not get a 5% price increase. You get a crisis. Think about what happened with natural gas. Europe was getting approximately 40% of its gas from Russia. When that supply was cut, prices increased by 400%, not 40%, 400%. And that was in a market where alternatives existed. LNG could be shipped from America, coal plants could be restarted, nuclear could be extended. There were options, painful options, expensive options, but options nonetheless. Silver has no alternatives. You cannot substitute silver in solar panels. The physics does not work. You cannot substitute silver in electronics. The conductivity is not there. You cannot substitute silver in medical devices. The antibacterial properties are unique. When Russia cuts off silver, there is no plan B. There is no alternative supplier waiting in the wings. There is only less silver chasing the same demand. And that means prices do not increase by 5% or 10% or even 50%. That means prices go vertical until demand is destroyed. And in the case of silver, demand destruction means factories closing. It means solar installations stopping. It means the entire green energy transition grinding to a halt. Let me walk you through exactly what happened because the details matter. The announcement came from the Russian Ministry of Trade and Industry. It was buried in a larger package of economic countermeasures, responding to the latest round of Western sanctions. The Western media focused on the headline items, restrictions on technology imports, limits on financial transactions, travel bans on officials. They barely mentioned the silver embargo. A few sentences in the back pages, a footnote in the coverage. But that footnote is going to cause more economic damage than all the other measures combined. The official language is precise. Silver in all forms, including ore, concentrate, refined metal, and semi-finished products, is prohibited for export to the following destinations. And then they list all 31 NATO member countries: the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Poland, all of them. Cut off immediately. The document also includes a provision extending the embargo to any country that transships Russian silver to NATO destinations. That means Switzerland cannot buy Russian silver and resell it to Germany. That means India cannot refine Russian silver and ship it to America. The Russians have thought this through. They have closed the loopholes. They are serious. Now I need to explain why Russia has this leverage. Because most people do not understand where Russian silver comes from or why it matters so much. Russia does not have giant silver mines like Mexico or Peru. Russian silver is primarily a byproduct. It comes from their massive nickel operations, their copper mines, their lead and zinc processing. When Norilsk Nickel extracts nickel from the ground, silver comes with it. When Russian Copper Company processes ore, silver is recovered as a byproduct. This is important because it means Russian silver production cannot easily be replaced. You cannot just open a new silver mine to compensate. The silver is attached to the base metal operations, and those operations are among the largest in the world. Norilsk Nickel alone is responsible for a significant portion of global palladium and nickel supply. They have been operating under sanctions for years, but the metal has kept flowing through various channels. The West needs their metals too badly to completely cut them off. But now Russia has flipped the script. Now Russia is the one doing the cutting. And they are starting with silver because they know exactly how much damage it will cause. Let me tell you who is panicking right now. Let me tell you whose phones have not stopped ringing since this announcement. The procurement departments of every major technology company in the world. Apple needs silver for iPhones. Samsung needs silver for semiconductors. Intel needs silver for processors. Every single piece of electronics you own contains silver. And the supply chain managers at these companies are now scrambling to secure supply from a market that just got 43 million ounces smaller. The solar industry is in full crisis mode. A single solar panel contains approximately 20 grams of silver. The world is installing over 300 gigawatts of solar capacity this year. That requires over 150 million ounces of silver. And that demand was already straining supply before the Russian embargo. Now the industry is looking at a supply gap that cannot be filled. Contracts that were signed assuming stable supply are now impossible to fulfill. Projects that were planned are now in jeopardy. The entire green energy transition just hit a wall made of Russian export controls. The defense industry is quietly terrified. This is the part nobody wants to talk about publicly. Every cruise missile contains silver. Every fighter jet contains silver. Every satellite, every radar system, every piece of military electronics requires silver for connections and contacts. The Pentagon has already been warning about critical mineral dependencies. They have already been trying to onshore supply chains. But you cannot onshore Russian silver. You cannot mine it in America. You cannot manufacture it domestically. When Russia cuts off silver to NATO, they are not just hurting the economy. They are threatening military readiness. And here is the truly diabolical part of Russia's strategy. They are not just cutting off NATO. They are redirecting the silver to China and India. The same announcement that banned exports to the West explicitly encouraged increased trade with friendly nations. Russia is offering their silver to Shanghai at a discount. They are offering long-term supply contracts to Chinese solar manufacturers. They are building an alternative trading bloc where Western sanctions do not apply and Western needs do not matter. Think about what this does to the global balance of power. China already dominates solar panel manufacturing. They produce 80% of the world's panels. Now they are getting preferential access to Russian silver while their Western competitors are cut off. The cost advantage this creates is enormous. Chinese manufacturers will be able to produce panels cheaper than anyone else. Western solar companies will either pay massive premiums for the remaining supply or they will go out of business. This is not just an embargo. This is industrial warfare. The price action tells you everything you need to know about how serious this is. In the 48 hours since the announcement, silver has moved more than it typically moves in a month. The Shanghai premium over New York has blown out to over $18. $18 on the same metal. The arbitrage that was already broken is now completely shattered. Physical silver is being hoarded. Refineries are being offered premiums they have never seen before. The market is in full panic mode, even if the mainstream media has not caught up yet. I have been tracking the silver market for years. I have seen price spikes. I have seen supply disruptions. I have seen manipulation and short squeezes and everything in between. But I have never seen anything like this. I have never seen a major producer weaponize their supply against half the world. I have never seen geopolitics and commodity markets collide with this much force. This is uncharted territory. And anyone who tells you they know exactly what happens next is lying. But I can tell you what the math suggests. The math suggests that prices have to rise dramatically to balance a market that just lost 43 million ounces of supply. The math suggests that industrial users are going to compete viciously for the remaining supply. The math suggests that the COMEX, which was already bleeding inventory, is now going to hemorrhage. Where is the replacement silver going to come from? Mexico is already maxed out. Peru is dealing with political instability. The recycling stream cannot scale fast enough. There is no cavalry coming over the hill. Let me address the question everyone is asking. Will Russia reverse the embargo? Will there be negotiations? Will cooler heads prevail? I would not count on it. Look at how the natural gas situation played out. 2 years later, Nord Stream is still disabled. Russian gas is still not flowing to Europe in meaningful quantities. The Europeans found alternatives. Painful, expensive alternatives. But they survived. Silver is different. The alternatives do not exist. You cannot ship silver from Qatar. You cannot build a silver pipeline from America to Europe. The physics of the silver market mean that this embargo creates permanent damage to Western supply chains. And frankly, Russia has no incentive to reverse course. The embargo hurts the West far more than it hurts Russia. Russia can sell every ounce they produce to China and India at premium prices. They lose nothing. Meanwhile, the West loses access to critical industrial supply. The leverage is entirely on Russia's side. They can maintain this embargo indefinitely at no cost to themselves. This is the perfect asymmetric weapon. Now let me tell you what this means for the broader market. The silver embargo is not happening in isolation. It is part of a larger pattern of resource nationalism sweeping the globe. Indonesia has restricted nickel exports. Chile is nationalizing lithium production. China controls rare earths. And now Russia is weaponizing silver. The era of free-flowing global commodity trade is ending. The era of assuming you can always buy what you need on the open market is over. Nations are hoarding. Nations are restricting. Nations are using their resources as strategic weapons. This changes the calculus for every investor and every government. Physical possession is no longer just a preference. It is a necessity. Paper claims on metal stored in foreign vaults are worthless if those vaults can be cut off by political decisions. ETFs are worthless if the underlying metal cannot move across borders. Futures contracts are worthless if there is no metal to deliver. The only thing that matters in this new world is actual physical metal in your actual physical possession or in vaults controlled by friendly jurisdictions. The West has been sleepwalking into this crisis for decades. They offshored manufacturing. They became dependent on foreign supply chains. They assumed that economic interdependence would prevent conflict. They were wrong. Economic interdependence does not prevent conflict. It provides weapons for conflict. And Russia just demonstrated exactly how those weapons work. I want to be clear about what I am not saying. I'm not saying that silver is going to infinity tomorrow. Markets do not work that way. There will be volatility. There will be pullbacks. There will be moments when it looks like the crisis is contained, but the structural damage has been done. 43 million ounces per year have been permanently removed from Western supply chains. That supply is not coming back as long as the current geopolitical situation persists. And there is no indication that the current geopolitical situation is going to improve anytime soon. The price of silver before this embargo was already unsustainably low given the supply deficit. The price of silver after this embargo has to reflect a new reality, a reality where the West is cut off from a major producer, a reality where China and India have preferential access to supply, a reality where the green energy transition has to compete with military needs for a shrinking pool of available metal. This is the moment the history books will record. This is the moment when Russia demonstrated that commodities are weapons. This is the moment when the West realized that their sanctions have consequences they did not anticipate. This is the moment when the silver market broke free from the paper price suppression and started trading at prices that reflect physical reality. For those of you who have been waiting for a catalyst, this is it. For those who have been wondering what would finally break the paper market, this is it. For those who have been accumulating physical silver and wondering when the patience would pay off, this is it. Russia just handed the silver bulls the biggest gift imaginable. They removed 43 million ounces of supply from a deficit market. They created an arbitrage that cannot be closed. They weaponized a metal that the West cannot live without. The natural gas embargo was a warning shot. The silver embargo is a direct hit. And the West has no defense. They cannot sanction their way out of a supply crisis. They cannot print silver like they print dollars. They cannot talk their way out of a physics problem. The metal is either there or it is not. And as of today, 43 million ounces per year is not there. 2 years ago, they cut the gas. Today, they cut the silver. Tomorrow, it could be palladium, or nickel, or platinum. Russia has leverage and they are using it. The only question that remains is whether you are positioned for the world that is emerging or the world that is dying. The embargo is in effect. The supply is cut. The panic is beginning. And the price is going to reflect this new reality whether the paper markets want it to or not.